Hey, what is up everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there is a fate that some consider worse than death itself. Picture this. You are a space marine, one of humanity's greatest warriors, engineered to be the perfect soldier. You have fought for decades, perhaps centuries, carving a legend through countless battlefields. Your chapter knows your name. Your brothers revere your deeds. And then, in one terrible moment, it all ends. Not with the clean finality of death, but with something far more complicated. Your body lies shattered beyond any hope of recovery. Bones pulverized, organs ruptured, flesh torn away by weapons that were never meant to be survived. The apothecaries stand over you, and in their eyes, you see something unexpected. Not grief, but opportunity. Not an ending, but a transformation. Sure, they tell you that you have been chosen for a great honor, that your service to the Emperor will continue, that you will become something more than what you were. They call it salvation. But as the cold embrace of the sarcophagus closes around what remains of your broken body, you begin to understand the truth of what you have become. You are a dreadnought now, a walking tomb, an engine of war powered by flesh that refuses to die, and a spirit that cannot rest. Your chapter will wake you when they need your guns, your wisdom, your terrible presence on the battlefield. And when the battle ends, they will return you to darkness, to a sleep that stretches across years, decades, centuries. Time becomes meaningless. The faces of your brothers blur together across generations. Memories fade like morning mist, leaving only the warrior's purpose. That the machines function, the endless cycle of awakening and slumber. This is the reality of the ancient dreadnoughts of Warhammer 40,000. These are not mere weapons, though weapons they certainly are. They are not simple machines, though machines have consumed much of what they once were. They are living monuments to a brutal philosophy that defines the Imperium of man, that service never ends, that duty transcends even death itself. That the individual matters only insofar as they can be useful to the eternal war effort. To understand what it means to be a dreadnought, you must first abandon any notion of kindness or mercy in the traditional sense. The Imperium does not preserve these warriors out of compassion. When the tech priests and apothecaries work to save a mortally wounded space marine by interring them in a dreadnought chassis, they are not motivated by sentiment. They are recovering an asset, salvaging decades or centuries of training and experience, preserving tactical knowledge and combat wisdom that would otherwise be lost forever. The pilot trapped within the armored sarcophagus is simultaneously honored and imprisoned, revered and isolated, kept alive by systems that care nothing for comfort or dignity. Consider the experience from the inside. You float in amniotic fluid, thick as oil and numbingly cold. The fluid fills your lungs with each breath, a constant reminder that you no longer breathe air like the living. Neural interfaces stab into what remains of your nervous system, in crude connections between organic tissue and machine circuits. Your natural senses are gone. You no longer see through eyes or hear through ears. Instead, data feeds directly into your consciousness. Optical sensors become your vision. Acoustic receptors become your hearing. Pressure sensors distributed across the armored hull become your sense of touch. You perceive the world as a machine perceives it, filtered through targeting matrices and threat assessments, reduced to tactical data and strategic calculations. And the sounds, always the sounds, the mechanical wheeze of life support systems maintaining your ruined flesh, the hum of power cells charging and discharging with each movement, the grinding of servo motors when you try to move what used to be your arms but are now weapon mounts and power fists. Your voice, when you speak, it emerges as a synthesized growl from voxcasters, a mechanical approximation of human speech that captures none of the warmth or nuance you remember having. You are becoming something else, degree by degree, awakening by awakening. The machine slowly consumes the man, leaving behind a hybrid creature that is neither fully one nor the other. But here is what makes the dreadnaughts truly tragic. truly terrifying in their implications. They remember. Even as human memory fades, even as the organic components of their brains slowly deteriorate over centuries of preservation, they remember enough to know what they have lost. They remember what it felt like to walk under their own power, to feel sunlight on skin, to grip a weapon with hands of flesh and bone. They remember brotherhood, as the simple human connection of fighting alongside warriors whose faces they could see and whose voices they could hear without the mediation of machines. And as the centuries pass, they must watch these memories slip away like sand through fingers, knowing that eventually only the machine will remain. The ancients, as the oldest dreadnaughts are called, have served for so long that they have become walking archives of their chapters' histories. Some remember battles fought during the Horus Heresy itself, 10,000 years in the past. They witnessed the Imperium's golden age and its long decay into the grim present. They fought alongside Primarchs, those demigod sons of the Emperor, who have now passed into myth and legend. When they speak, entire companies of Space Marines pause to listen, and because these ancients are the only living links to a past that exists nowhere else except in crumbling records and fading legends. Yet this wisdom comes at a terrible price. Each time a dreadnought awakens, it takes them longer to remember who and what they are. The transition from the deep sleep of stasis to full consciousness becomes harder with each cycle. Some wake screaming, their minds caught in memories of battles fought centuries ago, unable to distinguish past from present. Others wake silent and cold, their personalities eroded by time, until only the warrior's programming remains. The tech priests who maintain them speak of acceptable losses, of systems degradation, of the inevitable decay of organic components. But what they are really describing is the slow death of identity, consciousness, and humanity itself. The chapters treat their dreadnaughts with a peculiar mixture of reverence and utility. They are honored above almost all other warriors, addressed with titles of respect, their counsel sought on matters of strategy and tradition. Yet they are also tools, weapons to be deployed when needed and stored when not. The contradiction is never acknowledged, never discussed. A dreadnought is simultaneously a revered ancient and a piece of war gear, a wise counselor and an automated weapons platform, a brother and a thing. In the vast armies of the Imperium, where billions of soldiers die unmourned and unremembered, the dreadnaughts stand apart. Each one represents an individual preserved against impossible odds, a single consciousness maintained across spans of time that would reduce normal humans to dust. Yet this preservation is so twisted, as so fundamentally cruel in its implementation, that it raises questions the Imperium never allows to be asked. Is this truly an honor? Is existence as a half-machine, half-corpse really better than a clean death? When does preservation become torture? These are the questions that haunt the dreadnaughts themselves, in whatever moments of clarity they still possess. They know they are changing. They feel their humanity slipping away with each century that passes. But they also know that to refuse interment would be to fail in their duty, to deprive their chapter of their experience and knowledge. So they accept the sarcophagus, they accept the transformation, they accept an existence that stretches across millennia, watching everything they knew fade into history while they endure as walking monuments to a war that never ends. In the battles to come, we will explore the origins of these fearsome war machines, trace their evolution from the dark age of technology through the Great Crusade and into the blood-soaked present of the 41st millennium. We will meet the individuals entombed within the most famous dreadnought chassis in Imperial history, warriors whose names echo across 10,000 years. We will examine the different patterns and variants, from the ancient and irreplaceable Contemptors to the controversial new Redemptors. And we will grapple with what these walking tombs tell us about the Imperium itself, about a civilization so desperate for survival that it cannot even allow its greatest heroes the dignity of death. This is the story of the ancient dreadnaughts. This is the story of warriors who could not die, and the terrible price they paid for immortality. The ancient origins, from Dark Age to Great Crusade. The Dreadnought is older than the Imperium itself. Long before the Emperor unified Terra, long before the Space Marines were even conceived, the technology that would become the Dreadnought chassis already existed. These war machines have their roots deep in the Dark Age of technology, that legendary era of human achievement that ended in catastrophic collapse. During that golden age, humanity spread across the stars with technologies that seem miraculous to the degraded present. Artificial intelligence, warp travel, genetic engineering, all of these wonders and more were commonplace. Among them were advanced cybernetic combat walkers, machines that blended cutting-edge robotics with neural interface technology. Oh, when old night fell and human civilization fragmented into isolated pockets, scattered across the galaxy, many of these technologies were lost. But not all. On Mars, the forges of the Mechanicum preserved ancient knowledge in ritual and rote. On Terra itself, the techno-barbarian warlords who fought over the ruins of civilization maintained their own war machines. Degraded copies of Dark Age originals, kept functional through careful maintenance and desperate improvisation. These early walker chassis existed in dozens of different patterns, each one unique to its creator, each one a jealously guarded secret. The Emperor's unification wars brought many of these designs under a single banner. As he conquered Terra and forged it into the foundation of his Imperium, the Emperor gathered not just warriors but also technology. But the Mechanicum of Mars, recognizing in the Emperor the fulfillment of their prophecies about the Omnissiah, joined his cause and brought with them the accumulated knowledge of millennia. It was this fusion of Terran and Martian technology that would give birth to the Space Marine legions and the Dreadnoughts that would serve alongside them. The earliest Dreadnoughts of the Great Crusade were not standardized weapons platforms. They were relics, each one different from the next, maintained by tech priests who often didn't fully understand the systems they were preserving. Some dated back to the Dark Age itself, their pilots replaced dozens of times over the millennia, but their chassis remaining largely unchanged. These ancient machines bore names that hinted at their origins: the Lucifer pattern, the Furibundus, ours variants whose full specifications have been lost to time. What united them was their purpose: to allow a warrior to continue fighting even after sustaining injuries that would kill a normal human or even a space marine. But the concept of interring mortally wounded space marines specifically within Dreadnought chassis came later, developing organically as the Great Crusade expanded across the galaxy. The Space Marines were the Emperor's greatest creation, superhumans designed for war. Each one represented years of training, genetic modification, and psycho-indoctrination. To lose such an asset to battlefield wounds was wasteful, especially when ancient technology existed that could preserve them. The logic was coldly practical. Why allow a veteran warrior to die when he could be placed in a dreadnought and continue serving? As during the early decades of the Great Crusade, the practice was rare and often experimental. The surgery required to extract a mortally wounded Marine from his armor, preserve enough of his body to maintain consciousness, and integrate what remained with the dreadnought systems was extraordinarily complex. Many of the earliest attempts failed, resulting in death or madness. But gradually, through trial and error, the Apothecarian and Mechanicum developed reliable procedures. The success rate improved. More and more wounded warriors were given the option of interment rather than death. This was the era when the Contemptor pattern dreadnought was developed and deployed in significant numbers. The Contemptor represented a leap forward in dreadnought technology, and incorporating systems that drew inspiration from the Legio Cybernetica's battle automata. At the heart of each Contemptor was an atomantic arc reactor, a power plant of incredible sophistication and capability. This reactor generates vastly more power than the fusion cores or plasma reactors used in simpler dreadnought patterns, allowing the Contemptor to operate systems that would overwhelm lesser chassis. The sheer power output enables enhanced servos and actuators, giving the Contemptor strength sufficient to tear apart heavy tanks and throw smaller vehicles like toys. The speed and responsiveness of the servo systems allow for a fluidity of movement that makes the Contemptor almost graceful despite its massive bulk. But the arc reactor's most important function is powering the Contemptor's defensive energy field generators, and a technology known as atomantic shielding. These field generators create a protective envelope around the dreadnought, deflecting or absorbing incoming fire that would penetrate conventional armor. The shields are not impenetrable, but they significantly increase the Contemptor's survivability against weapons that would cripple or destroy a standard dreadnought. This same technology would later be miniaturized and incorporated into the storm shields carried by Space Marine Terminators, though the versions carried by individual warriors are far less powerful than the Contemptor's full-sized field generators. The Contemptor's physical design reflects its advanced nature. Unlike the boxy, utilitarian Castroferrum pattern that would become standard in later millennia, the Contemptor has a more humanoid profile. Its armor plating is smoothly curved rather than angular, its joints more sophisticated in their articulation. This isn't just aesthetic preference. The design allows for a wider range of motion and better balance, enabling the Contemptor to navigate difficult terrain and engage in close combat with remarkable effectiveness. A Contemptor can climb rubble-strewn streets, can fight in the confined spaces of ship corridors or urban buildings, can even engage in hand-to-hand combat with a precision that larger, clumsier walkers cannot match. The weapon systems mounted on Contemptor chassis are equally impressive. While a standard dreadnought might be equipped with relatively conventional weapons like assault cannons or missile launchers, Contemptors have access to exotic armaments that represent the cutting edge of Great Crusade technology. The Keres pattern assault cannon, for instance, is a rotary weapon that is considered by many Imperial savants to be the forerunner of the assault cannon used by Terminators. Compact plasma blasters can be mounted to the Contemptor's carapace, providing devastating anti-armor firepower. Most exotic of all are the graviton guns, weapons that manipulate gravitational fields to crush enemies or immobilize vehicles. Technology that was largely lost during the Horus Heresy. Different Space Marine legions customized their Contemptors to match their tactical preferences and available resources. The Blood Angels, following their Primarch Sanguinius's emphasis on aggressive close combat, equipped many of their Contemptors with specialized assault weapons and configured them for rapid deployment into melee. And the Thousand Sons developed the Osiren pattern, a unique variant that allowed Psyker Space Marines to continue using their psychic powers even after being interred in a dreadnought chassis. This required Magnus the Red's personal intervention to solve technical challenges that had stymied other attempts, resulting in a device called the Osiren that regulated and channeled the interred Psyker's powers safely. The Space Wolves, characteristically, had a more complicated relationship with the Contemptor pattern. While they maintained a number of these advanced chassis, they generally preferred the more robust and easily repaired Mark IV and Mark V Castroferrum patterns. This wasn't mere conservatism. The Space Wolves developed a superstition around their Contemptors, in noting that pilots interred in these chassis seemed prone to excess savagery on the battlefield, to an unwarranted brutality that stained the honor of those entombed within. Whether this was a genuine property of the Contemptor's systems affecting the pilot's mental state, or simply confirmation bias based on which warriors the Space Wolves chose to enter in Contemptors, remains unclear. But the superstition became self-fulfilling. The Space Wolves' Iron Priests began interring only those fallen warriors who already had dark reputations, whose sagas spoke of deeds more brutal than those of their peers. This created a cycle where Space Wolves' Contemptors became known for savage excess because only the most savage warriors were placed in them. During the height of the Great Crusade, yet Contemptors served as spearhead units across every major campaign. Their speed and resilience made them ideal for breaking enemy formations and creating openings that other units could exploit. A squad of Contemptors Advancing in formation was a sight that could break enemy morale before a shot was even fired. The distinctive silhouette, the thunderous tread of their footsteps, the knowledge that these were among the Imperium's most advanced and deadly war machines, all of this combined to create a psychological impact that went beyond mere combat effectiveness. But the Contemptor's advanced systems came with significant drawbacks. The atomantic arc reactor, while immensely powerful, was also temperamental and potentially catastrophic if damaged. If enemy fire breached the reactor's containment, the resulting explosion could devastate everything within a significant radius, destroying the dreadnought and potentially taking nearby friendly units with it. This made Contemptors high-risk assets. Commanders had to weigh the benefits of deploying such a powerful unit against the danger of losing not just the Contemptor itself, but also the supporting troops around it. Maintenance was another significant challenge. The Contemptor's sophisticated systems required constant attention from skilled tech priests who understood their operation at a deep level. Simple repairs that a chapter's tech marines could perform on a castroferum might require specialized equipment and rare components when performed on a Contemptor. The atomantic reactor needed regular recalibration. The field generators required precise adjustments. The advanced servo bundles could not be field repaired, but had to be replaced entirely if damaged beyond certain thresholds. During the Great Crusade, when the Mechanicum's Forge worlds operated at peak capacity and resources flowed freely to support the Emperor's armies, these maintenance demands were manageable. Broken Contemptors could be rebuilt, rare components could be manufactured or sourced from specialized facilities. Tech priests with the necessary expertise were available to provide support. The Contemptor was expensive to maintain, certainly, but the benefits outweighed the costs. Then came the Horus Heresy, and everything changed. The civil war that tore the Imperium apart was catastrophic for the Contemptor pattern. These advanced chassis bore the brunt of the heaviest fighting across every major theatre of war. At Istvan V, during the dropsite massacre that saw 3 entire legions nearly annihilated, Contemptors fought desperately to hold the line against overwhelming traitor forces. They were destroyed in vast numbers, their pilots killed and their irreplaceable chassis reduced to scrap. The Siege of Terror saw Contemptors on both sides of the walls, loyalist and traitor versions clashing in brutal combat that left few survivors on either side. But the destruction of individual Contemptors, while tragic, was not the fatal blow to the pattern. What truly doomed the Contemptor was the loss of the industrial and technical infrastructure needed to maintain and manufacture them. The Schism of Mars, the civil war within the Mechanicum that accompanied the Horus Heresy, destroyed or corrupted many of the Forge worlds that had produced Contemptor components. Tech priests who possessed the knowledge to maintain advanced systems were killed or fled to join the traitor forces. Specialized manufacturing facilities were destroyed in fighting or abandoned as their worlds were depopulated by war. The knowledge required to build new Contemptor chassis didn't vanish overnight. There were still tech priests who understood the systems, still Forge worlds with the capacity to manufacture components. For centuries after the Heresy ended, even as late as the 36th Millennium, new Contemptors were occasionally constructed. But each successive generation of tech priests understood a little less than their predecessors. Most manufacturing processes that had once been comprehended were reduced to ritual procedures performed by rote. Complex systems were treated as sacred mysteries rather than engineering challenges to be solved through understanding. By the 41st millennium, the ability to create new Contemptor pattern dreadnaughts is effectively lost. The Adeptus Mechanicus may possess scattered fragments of the necessary knowledge, guarded jealously by certain tech priest factions who regard it as sacred lore too dangerous to share. There are persistent rumors of hidden Forge worlds that might still have the capacity to manufacture Contemptors, secret facilities tucked away in distant corners of the galaxy. But if such places exist, they are not sharing their capabilities with the broader Imperium. What remains are relics. Each surviving Contemptor chassis is a treasure beyond price, maintained with religious devotion by tech priests who regard them as sacred objects as much as weapons of war. A chapter that possesses multiple Contemptors is wealthy indeed, while even a single functional chassis is something to be jealously guarded. The pilots interred within these ancient machines are often among a chapter's most revered heroes, chosen not just for their combat prowess, but for their connection to the chapter's history and traditions. The maintenance of these relics has become as much art as science. Tech priests responsible for Contemptor maintenance operate through a combination of fragmentary technical knowledge and pure ritual. They know which prayers to recite when recalibrating the arc reactor. They know which sacred unguents to apply when servicing the servo bundles. They know the proper sequence of maintenance actions, even if they no longer understand why that sequence works. It is knowledge maintained through apprenticeship and tradition, passed down from master to student with the fervent hope that nothing crucial is lost in the transmission. Spare parts present an even greater challenge. When a Contemptor's component fails beyond the ability of the chapter's tech priests to repair it, replacement parts must be sourced from somewhere. Sometimes, this means scavenging from other damaged Contemptors, cannibalizing broken chassis to keep a few running. Other times, it requires petitioning the Adeptus Mechanicus directly, requesting access to whatever stockpiled components might remain in the deepest vaults of ancient forge worlds. These requests are not always granted, and when they are, they often come with significant costs attached. The Mechanicum does not give up such treasures lightly. In some cases, tech priests have attempted to manufacture replacement components themselves, working from ancient schematics and using their best understanding of what the original parts were meant to do. The results are mixed at best. A replacement servo bundle crafted in a chapter's forge might function adequately, but it lacks the refinement and sophistication of the original Dark Age technology. It is a crude approximation, good enough to maintain basic functionality, but unable to match the performance of what it replaced. Over centuries, as more and more original components are replaced with these approximations, a Contemptor can slowly degrade in capability, becoming a shadow of what it once was. Despite these challenges, the Contemptors that survive into the 41st millennium remain formidable war machines. When a chapter deploys one of these ancient relics, it makes a statement. It tells the enemy that this battle matters enough to risk a priceless artifact. It tells the chapter's own warriors that they fight alongside legends, that history itself marches with them into battle. The psychological impact is significant for both sides. On the battlefield, a Contemptor operates with a fluid grace that belies its bulk and age. Pilots who have been interred for centuries or millennia understand their chassis with an intimacy that goes beyond mere technical knowledge. They can sense when systems are operating within acceptable parameters, when stress is building in specific components, when adjustments need to be made to optimize performance. This deep integration between pilot and machine makes experienced Contemptor pilots extraordinarily effective, capable of feats that newer dreadnaughts cannot match. The weapon's fire from a Contemptor's armaments carries a weight beyond mere physical destruction. When a Keres pattern assault cannon spins up and begins firing, the distinctive sound is recognized by veterans across the galaxy. When graviton weapons activate, reality itself seems to warp and twist around the target. These are not merely guns. They are relics from an age when humanity commanded technologies that the present can scarcely comprehend. Each shot is a reminder of what was lost during the Heresy and the long decline that followed. Famous Contemptors have achieved legendary status across various chapters. The Blood Angels maintain several Contemptor chassis that saw action during the Horus Heresy itself, sacred relics that carry the memory of their Primarch Sanguinius's sacrifice at the Siege of Terra. The Dark Angels guard Contemptors that fought on Caliban during their Legion's civil war, machines that witness the destruction of their homeworld and carry that tragedy in their data cores. The Ultramarines, with their characteristically comprehensive archives, have carefully documented the service history of each of their Contemptors, creating records that stretch back across 10,000 years. Among the traitor legions, the Contemptors that survived the Heresy face a different fate. Without access to the Mechanicum's maintenance infrastructure and stockpiled components, these ancient chassis have degraded more rapidly than their loyalist counterparts. Some have been twisted by chaos corruption, their advanced systems perverted into demonic parodies of their original function. Others have been carefully hoarded by chaos warbands, who recognize their value, maintained through scavenging and dark pacts with the forces of the warp. A chaos contemptor is a terrible sight. Advanced technology from humanity's apex, now wielded in service to the ruinous powers. The Contemptor represents many things to the various factions that encounter them. To the Space Marines who field them, they are sacred trust, are relics to be preserved and deployed only when absolutely necessary. To the enemies of the Imperium, they are threats of the highest order, targets to be prioritized and destroyed, if at all possible. To the Adeptus Mechanicus, they are precious sources of data and components, machines to be studied, and their secrets carefully catalogued, even as those secrets remain frustratingly elusive. But perhaps most significantly, the Contemptor represents what the Imperium has lost. Each one is a tangible reminder that humanity once commanded technologies far beyond what the 41st millennium can achieve. The Great Crusade was an age of innovation and advancement, when the Imperium's technical capabilities were constantly expanding. The Contemptor was built during that age, incorporating the best of what the Mechanicum could produce. And that the modern Imperium cannot replicate these machines, cannot even fully understand how they work, is a damning indictment of the technological decline that has characterized the 10 millennia since the Heresy. Standing before a Contemptor, observing its smooth curves and sophisticated systems, one can almost imagine what the Great Crusade must have been like. This was the level of technology deployed as standard equipment. This was what the Emperor's armies marched to war with. If the Contemptor represents the pinnacle of what was possible then, what other wonders have been completely lost? What capabilities did the Imperium command during its golden age that are now not even remembered, let alone preserved?
You know, I've been covering Warhammer lore for quite a while, and Bjorn's story hits different every single time I revisit it. There's something profoundly sad about being the last person alive who remembers how things actually were, not how legend says they were. Not how legend says they were. Imagine waking up every century and having to pretend you're this wise ancient when really you're just tired. You've forgotten more than you can remember, but everyone's looking at you like you hold all the answers. That's the part that gets me about Dreadnoughts. They're not really immortal warriors, they're just people who weren't allowed to stop. But yeah, let's continue the lore.
Pilots within these ancient chassis carry their own burdens of memory. Many Contemptor pilots are among the oldest serving dreadnaughts in their chapters, warriors whose memories stretch back not just centuries, but millennia. They remember when Contemptors were common, when seeing one on the battlefield was unremarkable. They remember the tech priests who could truly repair and maintain these systems, rather than merely performing ritual maintenance. They remember an Imperium that was ascending rather than slowly collapsing under its own weight. These memories are both treasure and torment. The Contemptor pilots know what has been lost. They have lived through the decline, witnessed each small diminishment of capability and understanding. When they wake from stasis and learn that another forge world has fallen to the enemies of mankind, that another fragment of irreplaceable knowledge has been destroyed, as they feel the loss acutely, they are watching their entire civilization forget how to maintain the very technology that might save it. Yet they continue to serve. The Contemptor dreadnaughts march to war when called upon, their ancient frames bearing weapons that the modern Imperium cannot replace, piloted by warriors who remember a better age. They fight not because they believe victory is inevitable, but because the alternative is to surrender, to give up on the Imperium despite all its flaws and failures. They are living embodiments of a philosophy that defines the Imperium itself. Persist, endure, maintain the vigil, no matter the cost. In the grim darkness of the far future, the Contemptor pattern dreadnaughts stand as monuments to what humanity once achieved and can no longer replicate. They are relics of a better age, as sacred objects maintained through faith and ritual, deployed in defense of an Imperium that has forgotten how to build such wonders. And within their armored sarcophagi, ancient warriors continue their watch, bearing witness to the slow decline of everything they once fought to build, enduring as they have always endured, because duty transcends even despair. Life inside the sarcophagus, the reality of entombment. To understand what it truly means to be a dreadnought, one must first abandon the comfortable distance of tactical assessments and historical overviews. We must instead consider the subjective experience, the moment-to-moment reality of consciousness trapped within a machine. Imagine that you are a space marine who has just sustained mortal wounds in battle. Your squad carried you from the battlefield even as your engineered biology struggled to keep you alive. The apothecaries worked frantically to stabilize you, but the damage was too severe. Your spine shattered, your organs ruptured, your limbs crushed beyond any hope of regeneration or augmentation. Then comes the conversation that will define the rest of your existence. A senior officer, perhaps your captain or chapter master, visits you in the apothecarion. He speaks of honor and duty. He explains that you have been chosen for a sacred responsibility, that your experience and wisdom are too valuable to lose. He tells you that you can continue to serve, that you need not die here in this medical bay. The choice, he says, is yours. But in reality, there is no choice. You are a space marine, where your entire existence has been shaped by duty and service. To refuse would be to fail in your purpose, to waste decades of training and conditioning. So you accept. You give your consent to the procedure that will transform you from a dying warrior into something else entirely. The surgery is both salvation and violation. The apothecaries and tech priests work in concert, their skills complementing each other as they extract what can be preserved from your dying body and prepare it for integration with the dreadnought chassis. They cannot save your limbs. Those are removed, the stumps sealed and capped with neural interface ports. Your digestive system is simplified or removed entirely. You will never eat again. Most of your musculature is excised. You will never move under your own power again. What remains is a torso containing your vital organs, your spinal column up to the base of your skull, and your brain. This biological core is placed within the sarcophagus, the armored coffin that will be your home until true death finally claims you. The sarcophagus itself is a marvel of arcane technology, a life support system designed to maintain what remains of your body indefinitely. It is filled with amniotic fluid, a thick, viscous liquid that will become as familiar to you as the air you once breathed. This fluid serves multiple purposes. It cushions your body against the shock of movement and impact. It provides nutrients directly through specialized membranes that interface with your skin. It maintains precise temperature and chemical balance, compensating for the organs you no longer possess. But the most disorienting aspect is that this fluid fills your lungs. You must learn to breathe liquid instead of air, an experience that triggers every instinct to panic and struggle. Your enhanced physiology allows you to extract oxygen from the fluid, but your mind rebels against it nonetheless. The sensation of drowning, of suffocation, never entirely goes away. It becomes background noise, a constant low-level distress that you learn to ignore but never truly overcome. Every breath reminds you that you are no longer entirely alive in any normal sense of the word. The neural interfaces are perhaps even more invasive than the physical modifications. Dozens of connection points are surgically implanted throughout what remains of your nervous system, creating pathways for the dreadnought systems to communicate with your brain. These interfaces allow you to control the dreadnought's movements as if they were your own, to receive sensory input from its various systems, to become, in essence, the dreadnought's central processing unit. But the connection is imperfect. There is always latency, always a slight disconnect between intention and action that your brain must learn to compensate for. When you first wake within the dreadnought, The sensory overload is overwhelming. Your natural senses are gone. You cannot see with your eyes. Instead, optical sensors feed visual data directly into your visual cortex. The images are similar to what you remember from natural sight, but subtly wrong. Colors are slightly off. Depth perception requires conscious calculation rather than automatic processing. You can switch between different visual spectrums: normal visible light or infrared, thermal, electromagnetic. Each provides different information, but none quite replicate the simple, intuitive vision you once possessed. Your hearing is similarly transformed. Acoustic sensors detect vibrations and convert them into sounds your brain can interpret. But you also receive direct audio input from vox communicators, overlaid with your natural hearing, in ways that can be deeply confusing. You hear your brothers speaking, but you also hear their vox traffic, multiple conversations layered atop each other. You must learn to filter, to focus on relevant input and ignore the rest. Some dreadnaughts never quite master this, spending their waking hours in a cacophony of overlapping sounds. Touch is perhaps the most alien sensation. You can feel pressure on the dreadnaught's hull, transmitted through the armor plating as electrical signals to your nervous system. When your power fist crushes an enemy, you feel the resistance, the crunch of breaking bone, or the shriek of tearing metal. But it is not the same as feeling with hands of flesh. The sensation is diffuse, imprecise, lacking the fine detail that fingers once provided. You can tell that you have grabbed something, but determining exactly how hard to squeeze requires conscious effort and practice. Proprioception, the sense of where your body is in space, becomes a complex calculation rather than an automatic awareness. Your brain receives data from the dreadnaught's gyroscopes and joint sensors, information about angle and balance and momentum. It must interpret this data and translate it into a sense of position and movement. In the early days after interment, many dreadnought pilots struggle with basic movement. They overcompensate, lurching and stumbling like children learning to walk. They reach for objects and misjudge distances. They turn too quickly and lose balance. It takes weeks or months of practice to achieve anything approaching natural movement. And then there is the voice. When you speak, your words do not emerge from a mouth and larynx. Instead, your thoughts are translated into electrical signals, which are then converted into synthesized sound by voxcasters built into the dreadnaught's hull. The resulting voice bears some resemblance to how you once sounded, but it is flattened, mechanized, stripped of the subtle emotional nuances that vocal cords provided. Yet some dreadnaughts find that their synthetic voice cannot properly convey certain emotions. Laughter comes out as a harsh bark, or the cycling of weapon systems. Grief sounds like static. Over time, many dreadnaughts simply stop attempting emotional expression in their speech, communicating in flat, uninflected tones that make them sound more like machines than men. The psychological impact of this transformation cannot be overstated. You are still yourself. Your memories remain intact, at least initially. Your personality persists. But the body that shaped so much of your identity is gone. You cannot feel sunlight on your skin because you have no skin exposed to the sun. You cannot taste food because you no longer eat. You cannot feel the camaraderie of a hand clasped in brotherhood because you have no hands. And the simple physical pleasures that made existence bearable, even in the midst of war, are denied to you. Sleep is no longer what it once was. When you are placed in stasis between battles, you do not dream. You simply cease to exist in any meaningful sense. Consciousness stops. Time passes, but you are not aware of it passing. When you wake, it could have been hours or centuries. There is no way to know except by asking. And often, your keepers do not immediately tell you how long you have slept. This temporal discontinuity is profoundly disorienting. The galaxy changes around you while you experience nothing. Brothers you knew are gone, their names added to the rolls of honor. New faces appear, warriors you have never met, who nonetheless treat you with reverent respect. You are becoming unstuck from the normal flow of time. and experiencing existence as a series of snapshots, separated by voids of non-being. The isolation compounds over the years. Your brothers, the other Space Marines in your chapter, have their own lives and concerns. They train together, fight together, rest together. You are apart from all of that. When you wake, you are a weapon to be deployed. When the battle ends, you are returned to your stasis vault. You have no life outside of war. The friendships you once maintained with your squad mates slowly erode. They move on to other assignments. They are promoted or killed. New generations of Space Marines arrive who know you only as a legend, an ancient one to be honored, but not truly understood. Some dreadnaughts cope with this isolation by retreating into memory. They spend their waking hours reliving battles fought long ago, or conversations with brothers now dust. The past becomes more vivid than the present, more real than the tactical situation unfolding around them. This can be useful in some ways. A dreadnought lost in memories of ancient campaigns might recognize a tactical pattern, might provide insight based on battles fought centuries or millennia ago. But it can also be dangerous. Dreadnoughts too focused on the past may not respond appropriately to current threats. They may call out orders to brothers long dead, may react to enemies that no longer exist. Other dreadnoughts embrace the transformation, leaning into their new identity as machines of war. They deliberately suppress their human memories and emotions, trying to become the perfect weapons their chapter needs them to be. They focus obsessively on tactical efficiency, as on kill ratios and ammunition expenditure and optimal firing solutions. They speak less and less as the centuries pass, until their communications consist entirely of terse battlefield updates and acknowledgement signals. These dreadnoughts are often highly effective in combat, but they have lost something essential. They have become what they always feared, more machine than man, consciousness reduced to a subroutine running on organic hardware. The question of identity becomes increasingly complex as the centuries accumulate. Are you still the same person who accepted interment? How much of your original personality must be eroded before you become someone else? If your memories fade and your emotions flatten and your capacity for connection withers, what remains? Was the Mechanicum would argue that identity resides in the continuity of consciousness, that as long as the same brain persists, so does the same person. But the dreadnaughts themselves are not always so certain. They feel themselves changing, feel the human parts diminishing, while the mechanical aspects grow stronger. Some accept this as inevitable. Others fight against it, clinging desperately to whatever scraps of humanity they can preserve. There are no support networks for dreadnaughts struggling with these existential questions. The Imperium does not offer therapy or counseling. Such concepts are viewed as weakness, as self-indulgent navel-gazing that detracts from duty. You are expected to maintain your function, to serve when called upon, to provide wisdom when consulted. Your personal struggles with identity and meaning are irrelevant to your chapter's needs, so you endure them in silence, in the darkness of your sarcophagus, in the spaces between battles when you are awake but alone. Some dreadnaughts find meaning in serving as mentors to younger Space Marines. They share the lessons learned across lifetimes of war, offer tactical advice, provide historical context for current threats. This relationship can be deeply satisfying, a way of maintaining connection to the living, even as your own existence becomes increasingly mechanical and isolated. But it is also bittersweet. You watch the young Marines grow, develop, mature into skilled warriors. You watch them form bonds with their squad mates, bonds you can observe but never truly participate in. And you know that eventually, they will die or be promoted away, and you will remain, enduring as always. The maintenance rituals provide another form of structure and meaning. When the Tech Marines service your chassis, checking systems and replacing worn components, you are involved in the process. You can feel their hands working on your hull. You can hear their prayers to the machine spirit. Some dreadnaughts develop close relationships with the Tech Marines who maintain them, a partnership built on mutual dependency and respect. The Tech Marine keeps you functional. You provide insight into your chassis' quirks and idiosyncrasies. Over time, you come to understand each other in ways that transcend normal communication. But even these relationships are complicated by the fundamental disconnect in how you exist. But the tech marine finishes his work and returns to his own life. You remain in your vault, waiting. He ages and is eventually replaced by an apprentice who learnt their craft from him. That apprentice ages in turn. Eventually, everyone who remembers you from your time as a flesh and blood marine is gone. You become a legend, a thing that has always existed as a dreadnought, your previous life fading into myth. The emotional life of a dreadnought is necessarily muted compared to what it once was. The biological basis for many emotions is simply gone. You no longer produce the hormones that would create feelings of fear or excitement or desire. Your emotional responses are neurological echoes, patterns firing in your brain that approximate what you once felt but lack the full physiological component. Anger becomes a cold calculation of optimal violence. Joy becomes mere satisfaction at mission accomplishment. Grief is reduced to tactical assessment of losses. Yet not all emotion is lost. Some dreadnoughts report experiencing feelings with an intensity that surprises them. Pride in their chapter's achievements, satisfaction at a well-executed battle plan, deep, abiding loyalty to brothers they have served alongside for centuries. These emotions seem to persist or even strengthen over time, perhaps because they are so closely tied to the warrior identity that forms the core of what a space marine is. As other emotional capacities fade, these martial virtues remain, becoming the foundation of whatever personality persists. The relationship between dreadnought and machine spirit is another source of complexity. According to Mechanicum doctrine, all machines possess spirits, consciousness of a sort that inhabits the technological systems. Whether this is literally true or simply a useful metaphor for emergent behavior in complex systems is debated even within the Mechanicum itself. But for dreadnoughts, the question is particularly pressing. Is the machine spirit that supposedly inhabits their chassis separate from their own consciousness, or are they one and the same? When the tech marines offer prayers to the machine spirit, are they praying to you or to some other entity that shares your armored shell? Some dreadnoughts report sensing something in their chassis, a presence that is not quite them, but not quite other. They describe it as an awareness of the machine's desires and needs, an intuitive understanding of when systems require maintenance or when components are failing. This could be explained entirely through the neural interfaces that connect them to their chassis' diagnostic systems. Or it could be evidence of a genuine machine spirit, a separate consciousness that has merged with the pilot's own awareness. The ambiguity is never resolved, and different dreadnoughts have different experiences and beliefs about what, exactly, they have become. What is certain is that the boundary between self and machine blurs over time. Initially, you think of the dreadnought chassis as something you pilot, a vehicle you control, but gradually, imperceptibly, your sense of embodiment shifts. The chassis becomes your body. The weapons are your arms. The optical sensors are your eyes. Yet you no longer think in terms of controlling the dreadnought. You simply move, and the dreadnought moves with you. You perceive, and the dreadnaught's sensors provide that perception. The distinction between pilot and vehicle dissolves. This merger has practical benefits. A dreadnought who has truly integrated with their chassis operates with a fluidity and responsiveness that newly interred pilots cannot match. They can make split-second adjustments to their balance, can compensate for damage to their systems automatically, can coordinate their weapons with an efficiency born of long practice. They are formidable on the battlefield precisely because they have ceased to be a human controlling a machine and have become something new, a hybrid entity, part biological, part mechanical, fully neither, and yet somehow both. But the merger also represents a loss. Each step toward integration is a step away from humanity. Each time you find yourself thinking in terms of ammunition counts and armor penetration values, rather than in words and concepts. You are becoming less human and more weapon. And unlike other forms of change, this one is irreversible. You cannot unlearn the instincts that make you an effective dreadnought. You cannot restore the human frame of reference once it has been replaced by machine logic. The tragedy of the dreadnoughts is not just that they continue to serve long after they should have been allowed to rest. It is that their continued service requires them to become something other than what they were, to sacrifice their humanity piece by piece in order to remain effective. They preserve the memories and knowledge of their past. But they experience those memories through an increasingly mechanical consciousness. They maintain their sense of duty and loyalty, but those virtues become disconnected from the emotional and social context that gave them meaning. They endure across the centuries, but what endures is increasingly a ghost, a fading echo of the warrior who once accepted interment with hope and determination. And through it all, the cycles continue. Wake, fight, sleep, wake, fight, sleep. Each repetition wearing away a little more of what remains, each battle taking its toll not just on the chassis, but on the consciousness within. The dreadnaughts march to war knowing that they are slowly dying, that each awakening might be the last time they truly know who and what they are. But they march nonetheless, because duty is all that remains to them, yet because service is the last thread connecting them to the warriors they once were. Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the eldest who remembers. If one were to seek the ultimate embodiment of what it means to be a dreadnought, one need look no further than Bjorn the Fell-Handed of the Space Wolves. Bjorn is the oldest living Astartes in the Imperium, a warrior whose conscious memory spans more than 10,000 years. He fought alongside Leman Russ during the Great Crusade. He witnessed the Emperor before his entombment upon the Golden Throne. He walked battlefields that have passed into myth and fought enemies that are now little more than footnotes in fragmentary records. Bjorn is not merely a veteran. He is a living archive, the last direct link to an age that the modern Imperium can scarcely comprehend. Bjorn's story begins in the latter days of the Unification Wars on Terra, before the Emperor had even conceived of the Great Crusade. He was among the first recruits taken from the tribes of Fenris when Leman Russ was discovered and took command of what would become the Space Wolves Legion. Even in those early days, Bjorn showed the qualities that would define his long service. He was fierce in battle, loyal to his brothers, and possessed a sharp tactical mind that could assess a battlefield and find the weak points in any enemy formation. His given name was simply Bjorn, which translates to bear in the languages of ancient Scandinavia. This was fitting, for he possessed a bear's strength and a bear's stubborn refusal to yield. He served in Leman Russ's personal company during the Great Crusade, of fighting in compliance actions across dozens of worlds as the Emperor's armies brought isolated human populations back into the fold of the Imperium. These were the glory days of the legions, when the future seemed bright and the promise of unity among the stars seemed achievable. The Battle of Prospero marked a turning point in Bjorn's life, though he did not know it at the time. When the Emperor ordered Leman Russ to bring the Thousand Sons to account for their Primarch Magnus's violation of the Council of Nicaea's prohibitions on sorcery, Bjorn was there. He fought through the streets of Tizca, the City of Light, as the Space Wolves enacted the Emperor's judgment. It was during this battle that Bjorn lost his left arm. The exact circumstances vary depending on which account one credits. In one version, a Thousand Sun sorcerer used psychic powers to corrupt Bjorn's arm with warp-tainted energy, forcing his brothers to amputate it to prevent the corruption from spreading. In another, a demon that had taken the form of the War Master Horus used its knowledge of Bjorn's name to gain power over him, spreading eldritch fire across his arm until his friend Caspar Horsa cut it off with an axe to save his life. Regardless of how it happened, Bjorn emerged from Prospero with one arm gone and a new epithet, the Fell-Handed meaning one-handed or the one who lost his hand. At first, Bjorn resented the title. He referred to himself as Bjorn the One-Handed with bitter irony. The loss of his arm was a wound to his pride as much as to his body, a visible mark of failure that contradicted his self-image as an invincible warrior. The chapter's apothecaries replaced the lost limb with a bionic prosthetic, but it was never quite the same. The artificial arm lacked the sensitivity and responsiveness of flesh and bone. It was a constant reminder of what he had lost. But Leman Russ saw something else in Bjorn's wound, and the way he dealt with it. The Primarch recognized in Bjorn's bitter determination a strength that went beyond mere physical prowess. Bjorn had faced loss and tragedy, had been forced to confront his own mortality and limitations, and had emerged stronger for it. When Russ needed someone who understood the burden of command, who could bear the weight of responsibility even in the darkest hours, he chose Bjorn. The Wolf King promoted Bjorn to his personal Wolf Guard, a position of immense honor and equally immense responsibility. But the Horus Heresy tested Bjorn in ways the Great Crusade never had. When news came that Horus had turned traitor and half the legions with him, Bjorn found himself fighting former allies, warriors he had served beside during the Crusade. The Battle of the Alaxes Nebula saw the Space Wolves ambushed by the Alpha Legion, a betrayal that cut deep. Bjorn fought desperately to defend his ship from Alpha Legion borders, fighting his way through the chaos to reach Leman Russ's flagship. It was only the Primarch's personal intervention that saved Bjorn and his pack from a traitor Contemptor dreadnought, a preview of the ironies that would come to define Bjorn's later existence. When Leman Russ disappeared in the year 211 of the 31st Millennium, Bjorn was not among the Primarch's companions on that final, mysterious journey. Russ had gathered his closest retainers for a feast, then suddenly called them to follow him into the Eye of Terror. All of them went, except Bjorn. Why Russ left Bjorn behind has been the subject of speculation for millennia. Some say the Primarch foresaw what would come, knew that Bjorn would survive as a dreadnought, and that his cold anger would keep him both alive and sane across the centuries. Others suggest Russ recognized that Bjorn alone possessed the strength to bear the burden of leadership in the Primarch's absence. Whatever the reason, Bjorn was left behind. The pain of this abandonment, the feeling of rejection by the Primarch he loved above all others, became a defining aspect of his character. Leman Russ had been more than a commander to Bjorn. He had been a father figure, a hero, the embodiment of everything Bjorn aspired to be. To be left behind when all the other Wolfguard went with Russ felt like a judgment, a statement that Bjorn was somehow less worthy than his brothers. This wound was deeper and more lasting than the loss of his arm had ever been. In Russ's absence, Bjorn became the first Great Wolf, the leader of the entire Space Wolves chapter. He led his brothers with grim determination, rebuilding in the aftermath of the Heresy, adapting to the new reality of a broken Imperium. He was a capable commander, respected by his warriors and feared by his enemies. But he carried the weight of Russ's absence like a stone around his neck, never quite able to reconcile his love for the Primarch with the pain of being left behind. Bjorn's heroic career as Great Wolf ended during the Proxima Rebellion in 934 of the 31st Millennium, little more than 700 years after Russ's disappearance. During a raid on a rebel fortress, Bjorn sustained wounds so catastrophic that even the Space Wolves' skilled apothecaries could not save him. His spine was shattered, his organs ruptured, his body was paralyzed and dying. In normal circumstances, this would have been the end. But Bjorn was no normal warrior. His knowledge, his experience, his connection to the chapter's history were too valuable to lose. The decision was made to inter him in a dreadnought. The irony was not lost on Bjorn. He, who had been saved from a traitor Contemptor by Leman Russ himself, was now becoming the very thing he had fought against. He, who had lost his arm to chaos sorcery and resented the bionic replacement, was now losing his entire body and becoming more machine than man. But he accepted the transformation because he was still a space wolf, still bound by duty and loyalty. If this was what the chapter needed from him, this was what he would provide. Bjorn was interred in a Mark V Venerable Dreadnought chassis, a sturdy and reliable pattern, well suited to the Space Wolves' preference for robust equipment over delicate sophistication. His chassis was customized with Space Wolves' iconography and equipped with a massive lightning claw dubbed True Claw, forged by the chapter's tech marines in homage to the wolf claw Bjorn had favored in his previous life. The plasma cannon mounted on his other arm provided devastating ranged firepower. He was a formidable war engine, incapable of tearing through enemy formations or dueling other walkers with equal effectiveness. But the transition was not easy. Bjorn's naturally sullen and proud nature was ill-suited to the helplessness and dependency that came with dreadnought interment. He chafed at his limitations, at the need to be loaded into drop pods like cargo, at the way his brothers treated him with reverent distance rather than the rough camaraderie he remembered. The cold anger that had sustained him through Russ's abandonment found new fuel in his transformation. He became bitter, withdrawn, prone to dark moods that his mechanical voice could not fully convey. For 500 years after his interment, Bjorn remained at the forefront of battle. He fought with a fury that bordered on suicidal, throwing himself into the most dangerous combat situations as if seeking the death that had been denied him. His kill count during this period was legendary. It is said that Bjorn personally slew more enemies than some entire chapters managed in the same time span. He defeated the demon Thransaber in a climactic duel on Algol 7. He crushed the greenskin warlord Makrima in the deserts of Quaran, his power fist reducing the alien to pulp. He ended the Thranks rebellion by killing the rogue psyker Vornalen with his bare hands, or rather, with his dreadnaught's armored grip. But even Bjorn's tremendous will and anger could not sustain constant activity indefinitely. Dreadnought pilots who remain active for extended periods begin to show signs of deterioration, both physical and mental. The organic components of their bodies cannot withstand the strain of constant neural connection to their chassis. Their minds become exhausted from the unrelenting sensory input and tactical demands. Eventually, even the most stubborn warrior must rest. The Space Wolves began placing Bjorn in stasis between major campaigns, waking him only when his tactical expertise was needed, or when the threat was severe enough to justify risking such an irreplaceable asset. This marked the beginning of Bjorn's true existence as an ancient, a warrior unstuck from normal time, experiencing the galaxy in discontinuous snapshots, separated by decades or even centuries of unconsciousness. Each awakening brought new challenges. The galaxy had changed while Bjorn slept. Brothers he remembered were gone. New threats had emerged, whilst the Imperium had evolved in ways that often dismayed him. The increasing power of the ecclesiarchy, the rising influence of the Inquisition, the endless parade of bureaucratic absurdities that characterized imperial governance. All of this was antithetical to the straightforward warrior culture Bjorn had known during the Great Crusade. But he adapted, because adaptation was necessary for survival. Over the millennia, Bjorn witnessed the Space Wolves' slow transformation. The warrior culture he had helped forge remained recognizable, but it acquired layers of tradition and ritual that would have seemed foreign to the Legion's earliest days. The chapter developed elaborate ceremonies and customs around their interactions with Bjorn himself. He became not just a warrior but a sacred object, the last living link to Leman Russ and the Heresy era. When Bjorn was awakened, it was an event of profound significance, marked by ritual observances and reverential treatment. This veneration was, in some ways, harder to bear than combat. Bjorn had always been a warrior first, uncomfortable with ceremony and formal honor. To be treated as a relic, to have young Space Wolves approach him with awed whispers, rather than the crude jests of battle brothers, was isolating in a way that even the sarcophagus's physical confinement was not. He was simultaneously the most honored member of the chapter and the most alone. Every 1,000 years, on the anniversary of the Emperor's defeat of Horus and entombment upon the Golden Throne, Bjorn tells the story of Leman Russ's disappearance to the assembled chapter. this has become sacred tradition, a ritual that defines the Space Wolf's identity as much as any battle honor or gene seed peculiarity. The entire chapter gathers in the Great Hall of the Fang, the Space Wolf's fortress monastery on Fenris, and Bjorn recounts the events of that fateful day when Russ departed and left him behind. For Bjorn, this annual retelling is both a burden and a catharsis. He relives the pain of abandonment, the confusion and hurt of being left while his brothers went with Russ into the Eye of Terror. But he also honors Russ's memory, keeps alive the story that might otherwise be lost or distorted beyond recognition. The young Space Wolves listen with rapt attention, hungry for this connection to their chapter's founding. For them, Bjorn is not just telling a story. He is providing a direct link to the past, a validation that their Primarch was real, that the legends are more than myth. But the story changes subtly with each telling. Memory, even Space Marine memory, is not perfect. Details fade or become confused. Bjorn finds himself uncertain about specific words that were spoken, about the exact sequence of events. He fills in these gaps with what seems most likely, but he knows he is constructing as much as remembering. This uncertainty troubles him deeply. If he cannot trust his own memories of such a crucial moment, what else has he misremembered? How much of his personal history is accurate, and how much is reconstruction layered over degraded recollection? The Battle of the Fang, in the 32nd Millennium, tested Bjorn in ways that even the Horus Heresy had not. Magnus the Red, Primarch of the Thousand Suns, and now a demon prince of Tsench, led an invasion of Fenris, seeking vengeance for the destruction of Prospero millennia earlier. The battle was catastrophic. The Space Wolves' fortress monastery besieged by overwhelming forces of chaos, space marines and demons. Bjorn was awakened to help coordinate the defense, his ancient tactical wisdom crucial to the chapter's survival. During the battle, Bjorn came face to face with Magnus himself. The corrupted Primarch recognized the Dreadnought as one of those who had been at Prospero, who had participated in the burning of Tizca. Magnus attacked with all the fury of a demigod who had been nursing grudges for thousands of years. He tore into Bjorn's chassis with psychic fire and supernatural strength, ripping away armor plating and crushing systems. Bjorn fought back with everything he had, but he was overmatched. A Dreadnought, no matter how skilled, cannot stand against a demon Primarch. Magnus nearly destroyed Bjorn utterly. The Primarch's attacks left the Dreadnought chassis critically damaged, systems failing across the board. Bjorn felt his connection to the machine weakening, felt his consciousness beginning to fade. This could have been the end, a death in battle against one of the Emperor's own sons gone mad with chaos. But intervention came. Other Space Wolves, including rune priests wielding psychic powers of their own, drove Magnus back long enough for Bjorn to be recovered and taken to safety. The damage was so severe that Bjorn spent decades in repair and recovery. Tech priests and iron priests labored to rebuild his chassis, now replacing destroyed components and reinforcing weakened systems. When Bjorn finally woke from his long sleep, he found that he had missed an entire generation of the chapter's history. Warriors he had fought beside were dead. New wolf lords had risen and fallen. The galaxy had moved on without him once again. This experience seems to have marked a shift in Bjorn's outlook. The near death at Magnus's hands, the long sleep of recovery, the awakening to find yet more of his past erased by time. All of it contributed to a growing sense of detachment. Bjorn's anger, which had sustained him for so long, began to cool into something else. Not acceptance exactly, but a kind of grim resignation. He was what he was. The galaxy would continue changing, regardless of his feelings about it. His duty was to endure, yet to remember what others had forgotten, to serve when called upon. In the modern era of the 41st Millennium, Bjorn's awakenings have become increasingly infrequent. The Space Wolves are reluctant to risk him except in the most dire circumstances. Each activation carries the risk that this might be the last time Bjorn wakes, that 10,000 years of accumulated wear and deterioration will finally overcome the Iron Priest's best efforts to maintain him. The chapter treats each awakening as a sacred event, surrounding it with ceremony and reverent preparation. From Bjorn's perspective, the gaps between awakenings have grown so long that continuity is nearly impossible to maintain. He might sleep for a century and wake to find the entire political landscape of the galaxy transformed. Wars have been fought and concluded without his knowledge. Chapters have been founded and destroyed. Entire civilizations have risen and fallen while he experienced nothing but the dreamless void of stasis. The psychological toll of this discontinuous existence is something Bjorn rarely discusses, but it occasionally surfaces in his interactions with the chapter. He will make reference to events or individuals that have been dead for centuries, not realizing how much time has passed since his last awakening. He will ask after brothers long gone, express opinions on conflicts long concluded. The younger Space Wolves handle these moments with reverent patience, gently updating Bjorn on current reality, while pretending not to notice the pain that flashes across his mechanical features when he learns of yet another loss. Bjorn's relationship with the concept of memory has evolved over the millennia. In his early centuries as a dreadnought, he clung desperately to his memories, afraid of losing connection to who he had been. He would rehearse them during his waking hours, going over and over the same events to ensure they remained clear and vivid. But as the years accumulated into centuries and the centuries into millennia, this became impossible. There were simply too many memories, too many battles and brothers and moments to keep them all fresh and immediate. Now, Bjorn's memory functions more like an archive than like living recollection. He has memories stored away, accessible when needed, but not constantly present in his consciousness. When asked about specific events from his past, he must consciously retrieve the relevant memories, sorting through layers of accumulated experience to find what he seeks. Often what he finds are not the memories themselves, but memories of memories, recollections that have been accessed and rehearsed so many times that the original experience has been worn smooth by repetition. This has led Bjorn to a profound understanding that troubles him deeply. He is not entirely certain what is true memory and what is construction. The story of Leman Russ's departure, which he has told 1,000 times, may not precisely match what actually happened. The faces of his original packmates, which he swears he can still see clearly, may be composite images assembled from dozens of different brothers over the years. His sense of who he was as a flesh and blood warrior may be largely mythologized. As a legend, he has told himself so often that he has come to believe it completely. Yet despite these doubts and uncertainties, despite the accumulated weight of 10,000 years of existence as something more machine than man, Bjorn endures. He is the eldest, the one who remembers, the last living witness to an age of legends. When the Space Wolves face their darkest hours, when enemies threaten that cannot be overcome through strength and courage alone, they wake Bjorn. And he rises, as he always has, his chassis creaking with age, but his determination undiminished. There is speculation among the chapter about how much longer Bjorn can continue. The organic components of his body are failing slowly, but inexorably. The technology that maintains him is degrading in ways that even the most skilled Iron Priests cannot fully prevent. Someday, or perhaps soon in relative terms, Bjorn will not wake from his stasis sleep. The eldest will finally be granted the death that has been denied him for more than 10 millennia. When that day comes, the Space Wolves will have lost something irreplaceable. Not just a powerful warrior, though Bjorn certainly is that. Not just a source of tactical wisdom, though his experience is invaluable. They will have lost their last direct connection to Leman Russ, to the Emperor as he was, rather than as myth portrays him, to the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy, and all the foundational events that shaped their chapter's identity. They will have lost the living proof that their legends are real, that their history is more than exaggeration and wishful thinking. But until that day comes, Bjorn continues his vigil, and he sleeps in his stasis vault, deep within the Fang, waiting for the call that will summon him to battle once more. And when that call comes, when the Iron Priests activate his systems, and his consciousness returns from the void, he will rise. He will take to the battlefield in the Emperor's name, his plasma cannon lighting up the night, and his true claw rending enemies asunder. He will fight as he has always fought, with grim determination and terrible skill, because duty is all that remains to him after 10,000 years. Bjorn the Fell-Handed, the eldest, the last of the company of Russ. A legend made manifest in adamantium and ceramite, a ghost from an age of heroes, a consciousness that has endured across millennia when it should have faded into dust. His story is the story of all dreadnaughts writ large, and the tale of warriors who could not die and the terrible price they paid for immortality. But it is also uniquely his own, colored by his relationship with Lem and Russ, by his bitter anger at being left behind, by his slow transformation from proud warrior into something else entirely. In Bjorn, we see what awaits all dreadnaughts who survive long enough: the erosion of memory, the isolation from the present, the gradual loss of humanity to machine logic. But we also see the stubborn persistence of identity, the refusal to simply become a weapon despite all the forces pushing toward that outcome. Bjorn remembers. Perhaps not perfectly, perhaps not completely, but he remembers. And in a galaxy that seems determined to forget its past and repeat its mistakes endlessly, that memory is itself an act of defiance, a Rylanor the Unyielding, 10,000 years of vengeance. Among all the dreadnaughts who have served across the Imperium's long history, few have demonstrated such unwavering loyalty and terrible purpose as ancient Rylanor of the Emperor's children. His story is one of betrayal and isolation, of a warrior who maintained his integrity for 10,000 years in the face of madness and corruption, of a final act of defiance that would leave a mark on a demon primarch's soul. Rylanor's tale stands as perhaps the ultimate expression of what it means to be a dreadnought, to endure when endurance seems impossible, to remember when memory becomes torment, to remain loyal when loyalty costs everything. Rylanor's story begins during the Great Crusade, long before the Horus Heresy would tear the Imperium apart. Yet he was among the first generation of the Emperor's children, one of the Terran-born warriors who formed the core of the Third Legion before their Primarch Fulgrim was discovered. These early Emperor's children were drawn from Terra's aristocracy, young men of noble lineage who embodied the ideals of perfection and excellence that would come to define their legion. Rylanor was exemplary even among this elite company, a warrior whose skill and dedication marked him as exceptional. When the Emperor himself led the final campaigns of the Unification Wars, Rylanor fought at his side. He bore the battle honors Roma and Thula etched onto his armor, commemorating victories in those ancient battles that brought Terra under the Emperor's rule. This was before the Space Marines numbered in the millions, when each legionary was individually known to the Emperor, when the dream of a unified galaxy seemed within reach. Rylanor was there at the beginning, a witness to the Imperium's founding moments. The discovery of Fulgrim transformed the Emperor's children. When the Primarch took command of his legion, he found warriors who had already spent decades perfecting their martial arts and tactical doctrines. Rylanor was among the first to carry the Palatine Aquila, the Emperor's children's honored standard, into battle alongside their newly found Primarch. This was a moment of tremendous pride and joy. The Legion, which had served with distinction but without its father, was finally complete. But Rylanor's greatest moment of glory also planted the seeds of his eventual transformation. During a campaign against the Eldari, those ancient Xenos whose schemes had plagued humanity since before the Age of Strife, Rylanor sustained grievous wounds that even Space Marine physiology could not heal. The Eldari were formidable opponents, wielding technologies and powers that could kill even the Emperor's finest. Rylanor should have died. That he survived at all was a testament to his enhanced biology and his brother's determination to save him. The Emperor's children. Apothecaries stabilized Rylanor, but they could not restore him. His wounds were too severe, his body too broken, so they made the decision to inter him within a dreadnought chassis, specifically a Contemptor pattern dreadnought, one of the most advanced designs available during the Great Crusade. Rylanor accepted this fate because he was still an Emperor's child, yet still dedicated to the ideals of perfection and service that defined his legion. If he could no longer serve as a warrior of flesh and blood, he would serve as a walking war machine. Following his internment, Rylanor became the Emperor's children's Ancient of Rites, a position of tremendous responsibility and honor. He presided over the Legion's ceremonials of induction aboard the capital ship Andronius, overseeing the progression of new recruits from novices to fully fledged Emperor's children. It was said that Rylanor possessed an uncanny ability to perceive lies, to see through deception to the truth beneath. This made him invaluable in assessing recruits, in determining who truly embodied the Legion's ideals and who merely pretended. But Rylanor's position as Ancient of Rites made him uniquely aware of the changes overtaking the Emperor's children. After the assault on the Xenos world of Laeran, where the Legion encountered strange alien technologies and artifacts, Rylanor began to notice troubling shifts in his brother's behavior and priorities. The pursuit of perfection, which had once been about martial excellence and tactical brilliance, was becoming something else. It was becoming obsessive, twisted, focused on sensation and experience rather than achievement and duty. Fulgrim himself was changing, though few could see it at the time. The Primarch was falling under the influence of the chaos god Slanesh, corrupted by a demonic blade and his own pride. But the changes were subtle at first, easily rationalized or dismissed. Rylanor, entrapped within his dreadnought chassis and serving primarily in ceremonial roles, had more opportunity than most to observe and reflect. What he saw troubled him deeply. This was not the Legion he had helped build. This was not the Primarch he had sworn to follow. When the Horus Heresy erupted and the Emperor's children revealed their true allegiance to chaos, Rylanor faced an impossible choice. He could follow his Primarch and Legion into damnation, or he could remain loyal to the Emperor and the Imperium he had sworn to serve. For some Space Marines, this was not truly a choice. Their conditioning and loyalty to their Primarch overrode all other considerations. But Rylanor was Ancient of Rites, trained to perceive truth and deception. He could see what his brothers were becoming. He could see the corruption spreading through the Legion like a cancer. Rylanor chose loyalty to the Emperor over loyalty to Fulgrim. This put him in a dangerous position. The Emperor's children who shared his view, who rejected the path their Primarch had chosen, were marked for death. Warmaster Horus, orchestrating the rebellion, had ensured that the loyalist elements of the traitor legions would be purged before they could pose a threat. The method chosen was brutal in its simplicity. The loyalists would be deployed to Istvan III, supposedly to bring a rebellious governor to heel, and there they would be betrayed and destroyed. Captain Sol Tarvitz of the Emperor's Children had been assigned to the assault on Istvan III as part of Fulgrim's honor guard, and a position that would have placed him on the surface when the Life-Eater virus bombs fell. But Rylanor, understanding the value of Tarvitz's leadership and tactical skill, traded places with him at the last minute. This selfless act saved Tarvitz's life and put Rylanor on the surface when the betrayal was revealed. When the virus bombs fell, when the Emperor's children, World Eaters, Death Guard, and Sons of Horus on the surface realized they had been marked for death by their own Primarchs, Rylanor was there. The Istvan III atrocity was horror beyond description. The virus bombs reduced the planet to a charnel house, killing billions in agonizing death. But the virus could not penetrate the sealed armor of a dreadnought. Rylanor survived the initial bombardment, emerging into a world of death where every surface was covered in the decomposing remains of humanity. The loyalist Space Marines who had survived the virus attack rallied under Tarvitz's leadership, preparing to resist the inevitable ground assault that would follow. For months, Rylanor fought on Istvan III, his Contemptor dreadnought lending its firepower to the desperate defense. He became a rallying point for the surviving Emperor's children loyalists, a reminder of what their legion had once stood for. When traitor forces attacked, Rylanor met them with the full fury of his ancient chassis, his weapons reducing former brothers to component atoms. He was reported destroyed multiple times, only to emerge again from the rubble, damaged but functional, ready to continue the fight. Well, the final battles on Istvan III are poorly documented. The War Master wanted the entire affair buried, the evidence of his betrayal erased. What is known is that eventually, the traitor forces achieved their objective. The loyalist survivors were annihilated or scattered. Istvan III was declared dead, its surface quarantined and abandoned. Among the reported dead was ancient Rylanor, presumed destroyed in the fighting. The Emperor's children. Traitor Legion moved on, dismissing him as a footnote in their glorious transformation. But Rylanor had not been destroyed. Badly damaged, barely functional, he had dragged himself to an underground hangar where Captain Tarvitz had ordered him to take up a defensive position. When the final attacks came, Rylanor was not at his post, and many assumed he had fallen elsewhere on the battlefield. Yet in reality, he had survived, trapped in his damaged dreadnought in the depths of a dead world, surrounded by the decaying remains of a civilization that had been murdered by those who were supposed to protect it. What followed was an ordeal that would have broken any lesser warrior. Rylanor endured on Istvan III for 10,000 years. 10,000 years of isolation, of silence, broken only by the mechanical sounds of his own life support systems. 10,000 years with nothing but his own thoughts, his memories of betrayal, his rage at what his legion and Primarch had become. The long sleep of stasis was denied to him. His damaged systems could not support full shutdown. He remained conscious, aware, trapped in a tomb on a dead world with no hope of rescue or escape. The isolation should have driven him insane. Perhaps, in some ways, it did. Over the long millennia, Rylanor forgot his own name. He forgot the names and faces of his loyalist battle brothers who had died alongside him on Istvan III. The specific details of his previous life eroded under the weight of endless time and solitude. But one thing remained, burned into his consciousness with absolute clarity: the need for vengeance against Fulgrim, the Primarch who had betrayed everything the Emperor's children had once represented. Rylanor's damaged dreadnought chassis sat in that underground hangar, corroded by time, buried under tons of fallen masonry. An unexploded virus bomb lay nearby, one of the weapons that had killed billions, but had somehow failed to detonate. Rylanor, with nothing but time and determination, began working on that bomb. Using salvaged components from the destroyed spacecraft in the hangar, using whatever tools and materials he could access through his dreadnaught's manipulators, he converted the virus bomb into something more. He added psychic amplification devices scavenged from destroyed equipment. He rigged the bomb's detonation mechanism to his own vital signs. And most crucially, he created a beacon, a signal that would pulse out into the warp, repeating a single message endlessly: "The Ancient awaits." For centuries, the beacon called out into the void. Rylanor had no way of knowing if anyone would hear it, if anyone would care enough to investigate, if his plan would ever come to fruition. But he waited, because waiting was all he could do, because vengeance was the only purpose left to him. His body, already ruined when he was first interred in the dreadnought, deteriorated further. The organic components that the dreadnaught's systems were designed to preserve began to fail. Rylanor was dying by degrees, consciousness persisting in a body that was slowly becoming a desiccated husk. Finally, in the 41st millennium, 10,000 years after the Istvan III atrocity, the beacon was answered. 3 Chaos Space Marines of the Thousand Suns. Traitor Legion, led by the Chaos Sorcerer Malin Vistario, detected the signal. They had been dispatched by their demon primarch Magnus the Red to investigate this mysterious message from a dead world. The phrase, "the ancient awaits," was ambiguous but portentous, suggesting something of value or importance. The Thousand Suns Marines descended to Istvan III's surface and navigated the catacombs beneath its dead cities. They found the underground hangar, the destroyed spacecraft, and the shattered outline of an ancient Contemptor dreadnought covered in dust and ash, its colors barely visible beneath millennia of accumulated grime. They assumed it was long dead, a relic from the Horus Heresy preserved in this tomb of a world. But Rylanor was not dead. When the Thousand Suns approached, when they attempted to disconnect the beacon device built into his chassis, he activated. His systems powered up with grinding reluctance, servos that had not moved in centuries slowly engaging. His optical sensors fixed on the Chaos Marines before him, and for the first time in 10,000 years, ancient Rylanor spoke. He had not forgotten why he waited. He had not forgiven what had been done to him and his brothers. The Thousand Suns realized too late that they had walked into a trap. Rylanor had not lured them here. They were bait for a far more valuable target. The beacon had been designed to attract Fulgrim himself, to lure the demon primarch to this dead world where Rylanor waited with his virus bomb and his hatred. And Fulgrim came, the demon prince having sensed the psychic resonance of the beacon and curious about what could possibly remain on Istvan III after all these millennia, manifested on the dead world. He appeared in all his terrible glory, no longer the beautiful primarch who had once led the Emperor's children, but transformed into something monstrous and divine, a being of chaos empowered by Slaanesh. When Fulgrim saw the corroded dreadnought, or when he realized it contained one of his original legion's warriors, he was amused rather than concerned. He offered Rylanor gifts, promised him transformation and pleasure beyond imagining, tried to corrupt the ancient as he had corrupted so many others. But Rylanor had waited 10,000 years for this moment. He had endured isolation and decay and the slow erosion of everything he had been, all for the chance to reject Fulgrim one final time. Rylanor detonated his virus bomb. The Thousand Suns sorcerers, realizing what was happening, desperately tried to contain the blast. Vistario and his subordinate Aktar used their psychic powers to create a containment field, trying to prevent the virus from spreading beyond the immediate vicinity. The strain was immense, threatening to destroy their minds. But they held the field, even as the virus consumed everything within it. Fulgrim, enraged by this defiance, attacked Rylanor's dreadnought with all his supernatural strength. He tore through the ancient armor, ripping away the protective shell that had housed Rylanor for millennia. He exposed the pilot's biological core, the withered, mutilated remnant of what had once been a proud warrior of the Emperor's children. Rylanor's body was barely recognizable as human, desiccated by time and the dreadnaught's failing preservation systems. Seeing this pitiful form, Fulgrim offered one last temptation. He promised Rylanor a new body, perfect and beautiful, gifted by Slaanesh. He promised an end to suffering, transformation into something glorious. All Rylanor had to do was accept, to acknowledge Fulgrim's path as the correct one, or to rejoin the Emperor's children in their eternal pursuit of sensation and perfection. Rylanor's response was unequivocal. He declared himself a servant of the Emperor, loudly proclaimed his loyalty even as his body failed, and rejected Fulgrim for all time. In that moment, the psychic presences of the Thousand Suns could sense everything. Fulgrim's endless malice and bottomless vanity contrasted against Rylanor's pride and unbroken honor. The demon primarch was revealed as the monster he had become, while the dying dreadnought pilot radiated integrity that had remained intact despite 10,000 years of isolation and obsession. Vistario, the Thousand Suns sorcerer, was moved by what he witnessed. He had spent millennia in service to Magnus and the Chaos Gods, participating in countless corruptions and betrayals. But in this moment, when watching a warrior maintain absolute loyalty despite every reason to surrender or despair, Something shifted in him. He saw that Rylanor, broken and dying, possessed more honor than Fulgrim could ever claim. More honor than perhaps Vistario himself retained. In an act of defiance that surprised everyone, including himself, Vistario proclaimed that Rylanor deserved better than any of them. Then he shot his fellow Thousand-Son sorcerer Aktar in the head, killing him instantly. With Aktar dead, the psychic containment holding back the virus collapsed. The Life-Eater virus spread through the chamber, consuming everything organic. It reached Rylanor's exposed body, finally granting him the death that had been denied for 10,000 years. Fulgrim survived, of course. A demon prince cannot be killed by mere biological weapons. But something had changed. Rylanor's defiance, his absolute rejection of everything Fulgrim represented, had struck deeper than any physical weapon could. The demon Primarch departed Istvan III with a wound that would never heal, a mark on his soul that reminded him of what he had lost when he embraced chaos. Rylanor's final act of vengeance was not Fulgrim's death, but the knowledge that despite 10,000 years of ascension to demonhood, despite all the power and glory Slaanesh had granted him, he was lesser than a dying warrior trapped in a corroded shell. Rylanor's story resonates across the Imperium precisely because it embodies the Dreadnoughts' tragic nobility. Here was a warrior who had every reason to despair, to give in to corruption, to accept Fulgrim's offers of transformation and power. Yet he had been betrayed by his own Primarch, left to die on a poisoned world, trapped in isolation for 10,000 years. His body had withered to nothing. His memories had faded. Everything he had fought for during the Great Crusade had been destroyed or corrupted. But he remained loyal, through all of it, across 10,000 years of isolation that would have broken lesser warriors within decades. Rylanor maintained his integrity. He remembered the oaths he had sworn to the Emperor, even when he had forgotten his own name. He kept faith with ideals that the galaxy seemed determined to prove hollow and meaningless. And in the end, when finally confronted with the object of his hatred and given the opportunity for revenge, he chose defiance over compromise, chose death with honor over life with corruption. Well, this is what makes Rylanor the Unyielding perhaps the greatest of all dreadnaughts. Not his combat prowess, though he was certainly formidable. Not his tactical brilliance, though his role as Ancient of Rites spoke to his wisdom and judgment. But his absolute unshakable loyalty in the face of every possible reason to abandon it. He proved that even a dreadnought, even a consciousness trapped in a failing machine on a dead world with no hope of rescue or recognition, could maintain the ideals that made the Imperium worth defending. The Ancient of the Emperor's Children died on Istvan III, his physical form finally claimed by the virus that had killed billions 10,000 years earlier. But his legacy lives on. His story is told and retold across the Imperium. And a reminder that loyalty is not merely a tactical consideration or a matter of conditioning, but a choice that must be constantly renewed, especially when that choice costs everything. Rylanor the Unyielding proved that even in a universe of horror and betrayal, even in the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war, integrity is still possible. Conclusion. The price of immortality. We have journeyed through the history and reality of the ancient dreadnaughts, from their origins in the dark age of technology, through the glory of the Great Crusade, and into the grim present of the 41st Millennium. We have met the individuals entombed within these walking war machines, warriors whose names echo across 10,000 years. We have examined the different patterns and variants, from the sophisticated Contemptors to the practical Castroferums to the controversial Redemptors. And we have explored the psychological burdens these ancient warriors bear, the slow erosion of memory and identity across spans of time that reduce normal human existence to insignificance. Now we must consider what all of this means. What do the dreadnaughts tell us about the Imperium they serve? What do they reveal about the price of survival in a galaxy that seems determined to destroy everything humanity has built? The dreadnaughts are, in many ways, the Imperium made manifest. They are ancient beyond measure, carrying within them the memories of an age when humanity's future seemed bright and achievable. They persist long after they should have been allowed rest, maintained through a combination of fragmentary technical knowledge and ritualized devotion. They function despite constant degradation, compensating for failing systems through experience and stubbornness. They serve purposes they may no longer fully understand or believe in, driven by duty that transcends reason or hope. Like the Imperium itself, the Dreadnoughts represent both incredible achievement and terrible tragedy. The technology that allows a consciousness to persist for millennia, piloting a war machine that can stride through the heaviest enemy fire and emerge victorious, is genuinely remarkable. It speaks to capabilities that the modern Imperium can barely maintain and certainly cannot replicate. But the cost of this achievement, the slow dissolution of the pilot's humanity and identity, was the profound isolation and endless waiting punctuated by brief bursts of violence. This cost is almost too terrible to contemplate. The Imperium preserves these warriors, not out of compassion, but out of pragmatic necessity. Each dreadnought represents decades or centuries of training and experience that would otherwise be lost when the body failed. In a civilization constantly struggling to maintain its technological base and tactical competence, this preservation of institutional knowledge is invaluable. But the Imperium's pragmatism extracts a price from those preserved. They are honored, certainly. They are revered. But they are also used, their continued existence justified only by their continued utility. This raises uncomfortable questions about what the Imperium values and what it is willing to sacrifice in pursuit of survival. Is the preservation of consciousness across millennia truly an honor? Or is it a horror dressed up in ceremonial language? Does service that continues beyond death represent devotion? Or does it represent an inability to let go? A civilization so desperate for every advantage that it cannot allow even its greatest heroes the dignity of rest. The Dreadnoughts themselves would likely give different answers to these questions depending on who you asked and when you asked them. A newly interred pilot, still connected to their pre-internment memories and values, might see their preservation as a great honor, a chance to continue serving when service should have ended. That same pilot, after centuries of existence as a dreadnought, might have a very different perspective. It might have come to understand that what they were offered was not truly a choice, that accepting internment meant accepting a transformation they could not have understood from outside. What seems clear is that the Dreadnoughts pay a price for their immortality that goes far beyond the obvious physical transformation. They pay in memory lost and identity eroded. They pay in relationships that can never be maintained across their discontinuous existence. They pay in the slow transformation from person to weapon, from individual with distinct personality and values to role with interchangeable function. They pay in the knowledge that they are becoming something other than what they were, watching their own transformation with a clarity that makes it no less inevitable. Yet they continue to serve. This is perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire phenomenon. Despite understanding the costs, despite experiencing the slow dissolution of everything that made them who they were, dreadnoughts across the Imperium continue marching to battle when called upon. They provide their wisdom to those who seek it. They stand as living monuments to their chapters' histories and traditions. They endure because endurance is what they do, because duty transcends personal cost, because the alternative is to simply give up, and giving up is not in a dreadnaught's nature. This stubborn persistence in the face of impossible burdens is what makes the dreadnoughts heroic, in ways that go beyond their combat prowess. They are heroes not because they win battles, though many do, but because they continue existing when existence has become a burden almost too heavy to bear. They are heroes because they maintain their duty when duty has cost them everything except the capacity to continue performing it. They are heroes because they refuse to surrender to despair, even when despair seems like the only rational response to their situation. The stories of dreadnoughts, like Bjorn the Fell-Handed and Rylanor the Unyielding, resonate precisely because they demonstrate what can be achieved when consciousness persists beyond all reasonable limits, when loyalty transcends even death and transformation. These are not simple tales of military victory. They are explorations of what it means to maintain identity and values in the face of forces designed to destroy both. As of how much can be endured when endurance becomes the only option, of what remains when everything else has been stripped away. For those of us observing from outside, the dreadnoughts serve as reminders of the costs the Imperium inflicts on those who serve it. Every dreadnought represents an individual who was denied the peace of death, whose consciousness was forcibly maintained across spans of time that should have allowed them rest. They are kept alive not for their benefit, but for the Imperium's, tools to be deployed when needed and stored when not, valued for their utility rather than their personhood. But they are also more than victims. Many dreadnoughts made the choice to accept internment, understanding at least some of what they were choosing. They decided that continued service was worth the cost, that their duty to chapter and emperor outweighed their own comfort or even their own humanity. This choice, made in extremis and perhaps without full knowledge of its implications, nonetheless represents a kind of sacrifice that deserves recognition and respect. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods, the dreadnoughts stand as symbols of both the Imperium's greatest achievements and its most profound failures. They are technological marvels maintained through degraded knowledge and faith. They are warriors preserved beyond death, transformed into weapons that can never truly rest. They are consciousness persisting across millennia, slowly eroding under forces that should have been given the mercy of ending. They are heroes and prisoners, honored ancients and living weapons, preservers of tradition and monuments to tragedy. They are the price the Imperium extracts for survival, the cost it forces its greatest warriors to pay in exchange for continued service. They are what remains when everything else has been sacrificed to duty, when even death becomes just another obstacle to be overcome rather than a release to be embraced. And they endure. In their stasis vaults, in the depths of fortress monasteries across the galaxy, thousands of dreadnoughts wait in darkness. They dream whatever dreams are possible to consciousness, trapped in failing bodies within armored shells. They remember what they can of past glories and past losses. They prepare themselves for the next awakening, the next battle, the next brief emergence from the void, before they are returned to waiting once more. When the call comes, they will rise. They will march to war in the Emperor's name. They will provide their counsel and their firepower, their wisdom and their terrible presence. They will fight because fighting is what remains to them, because duty transcends death, because giving up is not an option. And when the battle ends, they will return to their vaults, to the darkness and the waiting, until the cycle begins again. This is the reality of the ancient dreadnoughts. This is the price of immortality in a galaxy that has forgotten how to let its heroes rest. This is what it means to serve beyond death, to endure beyond endurance, to remain loyal when loyalty costs everything. If you've enjoyed this deep exploration into the most venerable warriors in Warhammer 40k, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support helps me continue creating detailed, atmospheric content that explores the darker corners of the 41st millennium. Share your thoughts about dreadnoughts in the comments below. Which of these ancient warriors resonates most with you? What aspects of their existence do you find most compelling or most tragic? Thank you for joining me on this journey through the armored tombs of the ancient dreadnoughts. Until next time, remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, even death is not the end.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.